You are listening to an After Dinner Conversation magazine podcast. After Dinner Conversation believes humanity is improved by ethics and morals grounded in philosophical truth, and that truth is discovered through intentional reflection and respectful debate. In order to facilitate this process, we have created a growing series of print books, a monthly short story magazine, and 2 different podcasts. This podcast, Philosophy Ethics Short Story Audiobooks, provides audiobook recordings of stories that have appeared in our magazine. And our companion podcast, Philosophy Ethics Short Story Discussions, is where we discuss the ethics of the choices made in the stories as a way to model the kinds of discussions we hope you're having about these readings with friends, family, or students. We would love it if you went over to check it out. I'm Roberta, your narrator and story editor at After Dinner Conversation Publishing. Thank you for spending your time listening to our podcast and for reading the magazine. Thank you for supporting us through your magazine subscriptions and through patreon.com/afterdinnerconversation. And of course, if you enjoy this audiobook reading, please subscribe to our podcast, share it on social media, and suggest it to friends. Today's story is Home for the Holidays, written by Alexis Dubon and published in our August 2021 magazine. Home for the Holidays by Alexis Dubon. It's been a year since I've been home. I missed Christmas because of work, so Thanksgiving marks a full lap around the calendar. My mom's been complaining lately about how difficult things have gotten for her. Everything seems so out of reach, so imposing, so impossibly unmanageable, she says. I know they're getting older, and I feel guilty about that. I have neglected to spend time with them lately. But it's been a really busy year, and I've had so little time for anything other than work. The 6 hours it takes to drive there always feels like it's going to be so much worse than it is. But really, it's a lovely drive. And it's nice to get out of the city sometimes and back to the peace and quiet of small-town life. My childhood home is a welcome sight, reliably familiar, unchanged from my youth, and instantly I feel at home. White shutters against blue painted siding, bright orange marigolds standing defiant against the imminent turn to winter, bright orange maple leaves surrendering, accepting their fate. There is nothing like the feeling of pulling into that driveway in autumn. It's like getting under a warm blanket on a chilly day. It looks like my dad had been a little negligent of the lawn, which is slightly odd, but hey, he deserves to be a little lazy sometimes too. But still, it's just so unlike him. My mom's familiar footsteps approach the door, and I smile as it opens. On its own somehow? No, there's a person standing there, and she looks like my mom, but that's not my mom. Mom? I ask. What happened? Oh my God, you too? I just don't understand what's going on. John! She calls out to my dad. John, get over here. It looks like it's gotten to Freddie as well. I stand in the doorway, shocked. Everything else has stayed the same. Nothing around us has changed, but my parents, both of them, are tiny, child-sized. My mom stands before me, no taller than 2 feet, and my dad barely 4 inches higher. Oh, Freddie, it's got you too, my dad cries, appalled and disappointed. What's got to me? I don't understand it. But both of my parents are completely horrified by my appearance, which hadn't changed at all. I mean, I hadn't even grown a beard. Shaking her head, my mother walks back toward the kitchen where she has a pot on the stove filled with cranberries that she's cooking down for sauce. They fill the whole house with a fragrantly fruity sweetness that welcomes me warmly, making the horror of my parents feel all the more shocking in contrast. My brain tries to process the delicious scents wafting out of the kitchen, the familiar environment of my childhood home, and the disturbing revelation of my parents all at once. But it can't. They look the same as ever, but little, as if out of nowhere they had both just shrunk. My mom had set up a stool so she could reach the stove, and she's holding a wooden spoon that in her hand looks like a baseball bat. She needs both hands to stir the sauce in the 3-quart pot. These diminutive stand-ins for the man and woman who raised me are so unsettling, occupying the space I had grown up in, where nothing else was any different from what it had always been. The figurines my mom collected are in the same place they had always been, but now they look like sculptures rather than trinkets. The TV seems like a movie screen when they stand beside it. "What happened to you guys?" I asked, bewildered and confused. I know I didn't change. Nothing had changed. I drove all the way here, 6 hours in the same car I had forever, and I didn't feel as though my body fitted any differently than ever before. "What do you mean, Freddie?" My mom, practically in tears, tries not to shout. "We haven't changed. You're the one who's changed, Freddie. And now you have some nerve asking what's happened to us. You somehow became a giant, like all this other stuff. I prayed every night that it wouldn't get you, but it's gotten you. Would you just look at this stuff? Everything. Huge. Don't you watch the news? Here, look at the paper." She tries to shove a newspaper in my face, proudly and pointedly. But the dramatic gesture coming from a person her size just makes it look petulant. Horrified, I read headline after headline. Widespread growth phenomenon divides family in Georgia. Help, I can't reach the doorknobs. One woman struggle with an agro-megafield world. Can we trust them? Believers of the humunculist epidemic lie. We didn't believe it at first. They kept trying to warn us on the news and in the paper, but we didn't believe it. They said the whole country was experiencing this widespread growth phenomenon, and that anyone was susceptible to it. They said the deniers were trying to convince people that they had shrunk. We didn't believe it until it happened to us. The sincerity of my mother's voice is alarming. She really believes that suddenly and without reason, the whole world around her just grew. Inanimate objects, woods, metal, all suddenly acromegaphied. Mom, you really think that explanation is that your house grew around you and everything in it? Look at this ceramic penguin. I've seen him here on this table since I was a kid, and I can hold him in my hand just like always. And he is exactly the same. Shh, you think I just up and shrunk one day? I had offended her, but yeah, that's what I think. Read the paper. Acromegaphication is a serious threat. It's true. I can't believe, though. You! Now she's crying over the monster I had become. But I hadn't changed. I hadn't felt anything, and everyone back home was my size. My house was normal. Nothing was bigger or smaller than it had been. My father chimes in with, "A lot of people have been experiencing it. I'm shocked you haven't noticed. So many families destroyed." But Dad, look. How come on TV everyone fits their house? How come it's only these weirdo publications like Schmalgut? Dad, look, across the street, the Winger's house. They're all the same size and they all fit their furniture. Tragic. My dad shook his head. But Dad, don't you think it makes more sense that you shrunk? I mean, not that that makes sense, but it makes more sense than your entire house acromegafying. Turkey will be ready at 5. My mom calls from the kitchen, still stirring that sauce like a witch over a cauldron. My dad looks me up and down and shakes his head. I thought I raised you better. And with that, he walks away to go sit on the couch. He has to use both hands to help push his hips up over the edge and then scoot himself back to reach the pillows. His feet are nowhere near the floor. The uncomfortable silence gives me some time to look over their newspapers, and I read that apparently the acromegafield are gaining power and had infiltrated mainstream news outlets to keep their takeover hushed. But reliable sources are reporting the real truth to those brave enough to believe it, they say. Consumed by the lunacy of these articles and the accusations they were making, the idea that anyone would believe these things, especially my own parents, I barely noticed the hours pass. In what feels like no time at all, my mom is calling for me to get the turkey out of the oven. I can't believe the grocery store only have these monstrous turkeys. Would you look at it? It's disgusting. My mom, standing next to the turkey, looks especially ridiculous. It's a normal Thanksgiving turkey, and it's as big as her. I am going to boycott that store. Shame on them for supporting that insane humunculism theory. Calling this beast a traditional turkey? I'm going to go to that new place down the block. There's a place that sells turkeys that are regular size? I ask incredulously. How could there be turkeys small enough for my parents? Well, no, but that's only because all those turkeys got bought up right away, they said. They said that all the normal-sized people like us, bought them all in advance. So you haven't actually seen one? No, but obviously they're in high demand since they all got sold and all that was left were these big ones from that awful acro denier. You're basing this on what the store owner said, but the only turkeys you've seen have been the ones that are comparable to this one that we have. Why is that so difficult to understand? Now she's getting impatient with me. Well, Mom, if the only turkeys you've seen are this size in proportion to me and not you, doesn't that imply something? It implies that even turkeys have grown. Why are you having so much trouble seeing the truth? We eat our food, trying sometimes to punctuate the silence with failed attempts at small talk. But every effort to pretend things are normal fails, and tension seasons the meals, overpowering the festive feast with mutual concern and disapproval between me and my parents, and that's all I can taste. I look into the window of the Winkers' house across the street, watching them pass serving plates that fit comfortably in their hands while my dad struggles to pick up his fork. I decline to spend the night as I had originally planned and return home instead, spending the whole 6-hour drive trying to figure out what had happened. I examine all the people I pass along the road. They all look like me. Mostly, I realize now that some of the people I thought were children are in fact miniature adults. I wonder if it's possible that I just hadn't noticed them before. After that, I started to notice humunculists everywhere. They hate that word, but that's what they are. They insist that they're just normal people, and that the acros are abominations, altered by poisoned ideas of what reality is, lied to by the media and local officials who ought to be hanged, drawn, and quartered. By the following Thanksgiving, they had even started getting elected to office, saying that the acros were eating all the normal-sized babies like shish kebabs in an attempt to eliminate them. And that's why no one ever saw normal-sized babies anymore. They started crafting tiny houses and remarking that those had been the norm all along, that it was the acros houses that were different. Companies started producing tiny appliances to accommodate them. They said that those appliances were standard size, the size all appliances always had been, and that the traditional appliances had been altered, blown up by acro lies. There are so many of them now. Just last year, they were completely anomalous, and now they are everywhere. They have an explanation for everything, whether it makes sense or not. I still go to see my parents, only for Thanksgiving. It's all I can stand. And they still have yet to produce a normal, non-acro turkey. They insist it exists, but no one I know has ever seen one. And now for the discussion questions. Number 1. The story brings up interesting questions about the perceptions of reality. How do you know who is right? Is there an objective right answer that can be determined, and if so, how? Number 2. In the story, some people are altered by poisoned ideas of what reality is, lied to by the media and local officials who ought to be hanged, drawn, and quartered. Is it possible to convince those that believe in a lied to by the media conspiracy that they are not being lied to? Number 3. How should the narrator treat his parents moving forward? Should he concede they might be right? Should he simply avoid the topic? Should he stop interacting with his parents altogether, or something else? Number 4. Why do you think that people that are getting smaller refuse to believe they are getting smaller despite what seems to be the more plausible evidence that this is so? Why do some shrinking people accept the truth, while others believe in conspiracy theories? And number 5. Can you think of other modern examples that parallel the themes of this story? What is the path forward to finding common ground when there seems to be none? What do you think? We've been reading Home for the Holidays by Alexis Dubon, and the discussion continues next week with the story Mahaba by Logan Thrasher Collins. If you enjoyed this story, head over to our companion podcast, After Dinner Conversation Discussions, and listen to our discussions of this and other short stories from our magazine. We want to hear what you think. Let's continue the discussion on our webpage in the comment section or on our Facebook page. Links are in the description. Thank you for joining us, and until next time, stay safe and let's keep the discussion alive.